Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Mr. K is Wrong, where I debunk some Facebook memes posted by someone I used to know who I call Mr. K. And this time I'm debunking two things that he posted, and I'm going to note how, he's hypocritical and wrong and stuff like that. So the first meme, it shows Obama and he's saying, I used to deport 3 million Americans at the same time. I bombed 7 countries without congressional approval. Where was your outrage then? So that's meme number one, and I'll get around to debunking that in a little bit. But here's the second meme. It's from Senator Chris McDaniel. This is a bit of a lengthier one. It says, somewhere along the way, taxes stopped being about roads, courts, and national defense. They now exist to sustain worthless politicians and to reward the friends, donors, contractors, and constituencies that keep them in power. Money is taken from everyone, filtered through Washington, and handed back to the favored few, all while being sold as compassion. This isn't a revenue system, it's a patronage system. A system built to serve itself has forfeited the right to exist. It's time to bring the current federal income tax system to an end. End quote. So that last one, it sounds a little bit more of a rebellious one, right? It even sounds like maybe a portion of the left might agree with it even. It's criticizing the system, man. It's another one where the Republicans are starting to sound like they want to be viewed as rebels and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to get into why that's bullcrap in a little bit here. But I'm going to do a point by point debunking of both of the memes and plus the larger contradiction they're both trying to hide. So remember meme number one, that's the fake Obama quote. And that's really the first rat to be smelled, is that it's not an actual quote from Obama. Now I'm not going to fault them too much for that because, it's not like it's not like everyone out there is dumb enough to think that it is an actual Obama quote, but there definitely are some people who would, because they lack intelligence, actually think that Obama said those things. So remember, it was, I used to deport 3 million Americans at the same time. I bombed 7 countries without congressional approval. Where was your outrage then? So this quote is fabricated. Obama never said that. And, it might be forgiven because it's obvious that they might be sarcastic with that one. But more importantly, almost every claim in the meme is misleading or flat out false. So, point number one, the claim that he deported 3 million Americans, this is simply untrue. Obama deported non citizens, not Americans. So, calling deportations of undocumented immigrants deporting Americans is dishonest framing meant to inflame outrage. So, even if you could find a case of like one person who was a legal citizen, you know, it's not equal to 3 million, of course. But I've not heard of a single case of Obama deporting American citizens. That would be more of a Trump era thing that he is trying to do. Yes, deportations were high under Obama, especially early in his presidency. That policy was widely criticized at the time, as I discussed in another episode. It's not like ICE was only controversial when Trump stepped in. So that's one of the false claims that are made by the right wing these days. These policies were widely criticized, mostly by the left, and there was outrage. So let's be clear about that. Also worth noting, many of these deportations happened under laws passed earlier and enforced aggressively by DHS, not through some secret authoritarian move or anything like that. And claim number two in this meme is that he bombed 7 countries without congressional approval. So this is an interesting one because it's looking at different military actions and putting them into one scare line, or whatever you want to call it. So the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were explicitly authorized by Congress. Now you might disagree with that. I didn't like either of those wars. I was actually a critic of them. But at the very least, you could say that those were, approved by Congress. I mean, for the most part, there might have been individual components of things that happened under the guise of those wars that would not have been approved of by Congress or whatever, like drone strikes or something. Um, but for the most part, they were a part of what was authorized by Congress. And drone strikes in places like Pakistan, Yemen, and Somalia were carried out under the 2001 authorization for use of military force passed by Congress after 9/11. So, again, maybe there were some drone strikes that I've never heard of or something like that that were extraneous and weren't approved of by Congress or something like that. Let me know in the comments if there's anything like that. But for better or worse, Congress approved of these powers, and you could criticize Obama for being a person who did drone strikes, but at the end of the day, you can't really say it was totally without congressional approval or something like that. And Libya is the most debatable case, as I kind of implied. Critics at the time argued that Obama stretched executive power. Again, there was outrage, hearings, lawsuits, and sustained criticism, but uh, the meme relies on a fake quote, a false claim about Americans being deported, and a deliberately sloppy summary of U.S. war powers. So it's not a compelling argument, it's a mashup designed to shut down discussion and just get people to believe in the meme without really questioning him that much. So, what one of the curious things about that meme is that it makes it seem that if you disagree with any aspects of it, that you're pro war or something like that. When of course that's not necessarily the case. My position here is an attempt to be nuanced, not to excuse the violence of the state or anything like that. I'm trying to point out that the meme is incorrect, not that the drone bombing campaigns were great or something like that. So, what did Trump do instead, when he got into office? Well, the meme was posted by Mr. K, and remember, he is a Republican. He's a rabid Trump supporter, and in the vast majority of ways. In fact, I don't think I've seen him criticize Trump even a single time that I've looked at his Facebook page. So, if the point is that both sides are bad, then the meme quietly ignores reality because it doesn't mention both sides. And of course, Mr. K doesn't do that either. So let's look at Trump's record. Trump actually expanded drone strikes and removed transparency rules about civilian casualties. So he made it worse. He took something that was bad and made it worse, which is quite often what Trump does. Well, 99% of the time, that's what he does. And he continued deportations, separated families, and built policy around deterrence through cruelty. He did not rein in presidential war powers at all. In fact, he has tried to have absolute immunity from any sort of uh, things that he might decide to do. Any crime that he commits, he wants to be able to escape any sort of accountability for it. So this meme isn't about outrage, it's about selective outrage and selective memory. And that's in addition to, like I suggested, lying about a few things or oversimplifying things or, just presenting a false front. So, what about the second meme, meme number two, the Chris McDaniel tax rant? This one it's more polished, but it's still deeply dishonest if you really think about what the meme is saying and the context of it being a right winger who's making this claim. So, remember that one said that taxes stopped being about roads, courts, and national defense. It ended up babbling about, you know, certain things that, some words that make it sound like it's rebellious. And it ended by saying it's time to bring the current federal income tax system to an end. So, first of all, there's a fake story of where taxes go. Federal taxes still overwhelmingly fund Social Security, Medicare and Medicaid, what is called defense, infrastructure, courts and law enforcement, and all that kind of stuff. And sciences, of course, you get some funding for the science industry and medicine, etc. So the idea that taxes mainly exist to, quote, reward donors and constituencies, end quote, is just rhetoric. It's not really a serious analysis. And yes, corruption exists, but this speech treats government itself as illegitimate while carefully avoiding specifics. That's why this was a meme that was shared by Republicans, because one of the things they tend to avoid in memes is specifics. Because if you really think about corruption, well, the biggest source of corruption in terms of government spending is actually the United States military, and the US military is also the biggest polluter if you care at all about that. This meme doesn't mention that, but presumably, right wingers would at least sometimes pretend to care about pollution in some instances. Like I've heard them criticize China for being a big polluter and stuff like that. But the fact that they avoid specifics, it's a major red flag. So if you want to know the real Republican position on taxes, Republicans are not anti-tax. I've said this many times. It's not like they're badass anarchists or something like that. You people need to understand that out there. They are anti-tax for the wealthy. What they actually support is, at least in many cases, they offer differing views on things, but the vast majority of right wingers are actually pro taxation. They just want to change how it's done. So they tend to actually support payroll taxes that hit workers the hardest, sales taxes and fees that are regressive, and of course they're in favor of massive military budgets, corporate subsidies and bailouts, tax cuts that disproportionately benefit the high earners and large corporations. And what they oppose is progressive income taxes, capital gains reform, estate taxes, IRS enforcement on wealthy tax cheats. Ending the federal income tax would, in fact, shift the burden onto working people more than it already is. It would blow a hole in Social Security and Medicare. It would force higher state and local taxes or explode the deficit while pretending it's freedom. That's why I don't know why I said or. It would do that and explode the deficit. So that's not really rebellion, it's a wealth transfer. So the Anti Washington Act is silly because calling the system a patronage system while defending defense contractors, fossil fuel subsidies, agribusiness handouts, and Wall Street bailouts, it's pure theater to, mock uh, the Washington establishment, while not criticizing those things. So Republicans don't want a smaller patronage system. They want a more private one with fewer rules and less accountability. The Trump angle that Republicans won't talk about is that Trump had unified Republican control. So what did he do? He passed a tax bill that overwhelmingly favored corporations and the wealthy. He added trillions to the deficit. He did not eliminate the income tax, notably. Like, if that's one of the things you wanted, he didn't do it, and he still hasn't done it, and he isn't talking about it. He's talking about invading Greenland, so if you are one of those people who does want him to eliminate the income tax, well, why isn't he talking about why hasn't he done it? He did not end corruption. Obviously, he's the most corrupt president that we've ever had. And he's also a pirate on top of that. He literally stole an oil tanker and kidnapped the president of a foreign country. So I mean, he's a kidnapper and a pirate, and of course he's got the Epstein ties and all that kind of stuff. There's a real interesting leak that came out. Well, it technically wasn't a leak because it was from the government itself, and it provided some new shocking details of tips of what Trump and Epstein were alleged to be up to. So I might do an episode on that in the near future because there are all kinds of tips, and some of them are interesting. Some of the names that end up in there that add a little bit of credibility, because they're not necessarily political figures. They're just like random celebrities being named in some of these tips. And one of the new Epstein uh, releases, again, uh, the one that I looked at, it was from the government itself, but then like moments later, it was actually no longer available. So somebody in the federal government looked at that, and they were like, "Oh crap, we gotta delete this now. This is revealing too much." So I'm gonna get into that probably in a future episode here. So you know, Trump didn't end corruption or those trafficking uh, things. He did not shrink the military or the surveillance state because none of that was ever the goal. So the bottom line here, you know, in the ultimate uh, formulation of what I've said, is that Obama meme is built on a fake quote and dishonest framing. The tax meme dresses up old plutocracy as populism. Trump didn't fight these systems, he used them. Republicans are not anti tax rebels. They are selective tax engineers who want the burden shifted downward while calling it freedom. And these memes aren't about truth, they're about giving people someone to blame while protecting the people at the top.